Hi, everyone. I have the pleasure of talking with you about gratitude. And you very well may be asking yourself the question, why gratitude right now? Maybe even bucking up against the idea of gratitude. Well, I have a favorite author who talks about the world being both brutal and beautiful. Glennon Doyle, she talks about the world being brutiful. And it's absolutely true. There's so much to be concerned about right now and to worry about. And there is so much goodness in the world at the same time. The problem is that we all, as humans, are wired to protect ourselves with a negativity bias. In other words, we are alert to any possible sign of danger, of badness. And so we're wired to remember what is negative. And so one of the reasons I think practicing gratitude is so incredibly important is just to counter that negativity bias and to entertain that, we have two different sides, two different things to focus on in our life. And focusing on the good helps to counter all the badness that we automatically pick up on. So, what is gratitude? It is a recognition of goodness, a recognition that there is goodness in the world, first of all. And second of all, it's a recognition that goodness comes from something or someone outside of ourselves. So that may be other people, that may be a higher power. If you are spiritually inclined, there is goodness, number one, and that goodness comes from outside of ourselves. And that is why gratitude is a we emotion. It's a social emotion, a social feeling or state. And it's a relationship strengthening emotion. So when we express and receive and practice gratitude, we're tapping into two social emotional competencies in particular. First of all, social awareness. We're looking for the good around us. We're looking for the heroes, as Mr. Rogers used to tell us to do. And we're also, if we're learning how to express and receive gratitude, we are practicing relationship skills. So social emotional learning, we're looking at social awareness, and we're looking at relationship skills in particular. The other thing to know about gratitude, which is pretty powerful when you look at the research, is that it really is growable. You may not be inclined to be particularly positive in your life. I know I grew up in a family that tended to look on the negative side, the glass half empty perspective. But I have learned in my life and continue to learn how to counter that with practices. So I wanted to share with you that the area of the brain that seems to be tapped when we express gratitude is that CEO of the brain, the medial prefrontal cortex, and it's responsible for learning and decision making. So in research studies, we found that folks who write a gratitude letter and express their gratitude just a couple of different times, even 2 or 3 months after that expression of gratitude, researchers are seeing brain differences that hold on beyond that letter writing. So once we plant the seeds of gratitude and practicing gratitude, it looks like there's a pretty powerful effect on the brain, not just immediately, but months down the road, which to me is almost difficult to believe, but it seems to come out in the research over and over again. So we can learn it, we can hardwire it into our brain, and practicing it can have long-term effects in terms of our mental health and well-being. So today, what we're going to do really briefly is I'm going to share a practice with you, a gratitude practice with you that you can try right in the moment. I'm going to share a second practice that you can try with your colleagues and a third practice that you can share with students, but anyone in your school. So let's get started. So let's start with a very brief practice that involves some writing about gratitude. When I ask you to pull out a pencil and paper or simply type on your screen, you're going to hear a chime, and I'm going to ask you to start writing or typing. And once you put your pen or your pencil to paper, don't take it off the page, kind of like a free write. Keep writing. Don't worry about spelling or about putting thoughts in sentences. No one will see this but you. And if you get stuck and you can't think of anything to write, just keep writing the same thing over and over again. You can also draw or scribble if you don't feel like writing. But here's the question, shockingly. Write or draw all the things you're grateful for in your life. It can be very little things. They can be big things. They can be people. They can be places, things, activities, food, nature, anything. Just write as many things as you can think of in just a few seconds. Okay? So here you go. Okay, here's where I wish I could hear all the things. Take a look at your list or your pictures and think about, in this moment, thoughts that you had during this process, feelings, maybe even any physical sensations that you experience. We'll come back to that in a second. I have to tell you that during my 7 years of single mamahood, I have a little girl who is now 18, but at the time she was quite young when it was just the two of us. And I used to spend every day for at least a year, I would type into the notes of my cell phone 3 things that I was grateful for every day with her. And then at the end of the day, we would share our gratitudes. And I tell you, it was pretty, talk about relationship strengthening. It was a beautiful way to connect with my daughter. And I remember so many times during that particular year, I think she was 7 when we did it, she would say to me during a moment that we saw something we loved or appreciated, a cupcake, or saw a dog wagging its tail and jumping on its owner, any little thing, she would go, "Mom, that's going to be your gratitude for today, right?" And it was just a beautiful time of savoring with her. So I hope that you felt some positive emotion during that experience, because I want to share with you some of the benefits of gratitude. So the research is stunningly powerful at this point. Gratitude can help us reduce feelings of anxiety and depression. It can bring us greater happiness and well-being. And in terms of emotional experience, greater optimism, a sense of joy, pleasure, even greater enthusiasm, and other positive emotions. So you may have felt one or more of those emotions during that very, very brief experience. Gratitude, it can also really enhance our relationships. It promotes forgiveness. It makes us feel closer to each other, more committed and connected to friends. And also, there's research on romantic partners having closer connections as they express and experience more gratitude. It's this, once we express gratitude, there's this whole pay it forward kind of phenomenon with it, so that it spreads. And grateful people also tend to be more helpful, and they tend to be more altruistic and also more compassionate. In a review of over 50 studies, researchers found that gratitude is even more strongly linked to pro-social or kind and helpful behaviors than happiness is, and even more than empathy as well. So powerful stuff. It can also, gratitude can help you, it can strengthen your immune system. It can lower blood pressure, reduce symptoms of illness, and make you feel less bothered about aches and pains. It has a motivating effect in terms of encouraging you to exercise more and sleep better. And finally, at this time in our world, I think it's particularly important to raise up that gratitude can help us to cope with stress and to potentially become more resilient. So I'm going to ask you right now to imagine something. So imagine that you and one of your colleagues, maybe not one of your closest colleagues, but you and someone down your hall, you have a task and you have to engage in a 6-minute task completely unrelated to your career. You have to design a bicycle together on paper. You have to create a marketing plan and a sales pitch in 6 minutes together as a pair. And then you each individually have to pitch your design and your marketing plan to a group of completely stone-faced people. So I don't know about you, but that would get my heart rate going and my stress response would be very physiologically apparent. But in a study that just came out this year, when researchers put together pairs of people who knew each other a little, not super well, they put the pairs together in 2 different conditions. So in one condition, there was an expressor of gratitude and a receiver of gratitude in the pair. And in the other condition, there's an expressor and receiver, but the expressor just talked about their day. Okay. So what happened was the researchers looked at the physiology, the cardiovascular responses in these control group versus treatment group pairs, and they found that just a brief sharing of gratitude in the experimental pair, they discovered that the physiology and the cardiovascular response was so much calmer and stronger and more resilient during the activity of designing this bike and the pitch and everything, and also presenting. So it makes me think a lot about how a little appreciation among us at work can go quite a long way when we're facing particularly challenging tasks. So I wanted to share that little research story with you. And now I want to share a practice that you can try with your colleagues. And this is so incredibly simple. And I'm sure you've heard of this idea before, but it's well researched. So all you need to do to tweak your staff meeting plan or your department meeting plan is just carve out a few minutes before the meeting where you ask colleagues in the group to share just one thing in the last week. So it's fairly concrete. So look at the last week and share one thing you appreciate about someone in this group. So the idea in this practice is to think of something simple. It could be, hey, thank you so much for bringing me the coffee. Last Monday morning, I was absolutely exhausted, and you got me a cup of coffee and brought it in to the classroom, and it made my day and maybe even my week. So simple expressions of gratitude to colleagues. The key too is not just thinking about what you're grateful for, but literally facing that person in the circle or in the meeting and saying concretely, I really appreciate this. So it's that communication that they receive, you express, and everyone else in the room hears. And that can have a really powerful effect on the group and on stress levels and on trust and a sense of belonging that you all feel in the moment. I know for me, right now in this moment, I want to ask you to think of someone you could say or share an appreciation to, and you might just text them right now or right after this session. So a couple of things to keep in mind. First, timing. Research is showing us that you can overdose on gratitude. And apparently, in a recent study, people who express gratitude just once a week experienced a greater increase in well-being than those who express gratitude 3 or 4 times that same week. So you want to not do it so much that it loses its meaning, not make it something that is a forced share in your classroom necessarily, but something that becomes an opportunity and something that your colleagues or you and your students look forward to. And the other thing to think about absolutely is trauma. And I know we're more well aware of trauma probably than we ever have been in light of an emphasis in our schools, but also just all the things that we have been grappling with in the last few years in particular. So it's on our minds, but it really needs to be on our minds when we think about gratitude, because sometimes people are just not going to feel ready to talk about gratitude when their lives are heavy with grief, illness, economic hardship, you name it. I know you know. So it's really important. Researchers Jeffrey Froh and Giacomo Bono say, hey, if your kids are bucking the idea of gratitude, absolutely just be there to validate the feeling. And hey, that sounds really difficult. I can see why you're feeling it can be hard to be grateful for something right now. But when we show empathy and we validate feelings, we're helping kids to understand their emotions and to express them. And we're also contributing to resilience through that validation process and kids' capacity to acknowledge the feelings of others, which is also essential to gratitude. So keep in mind trauma, be sensitive to how you frame and present a gratitude practice and how you validate kids around you and colleagues for that matter. It doesn't have to be a forced practice. And finally, we are discovering a lot of new research on different cultural expressions of gratitude. And it's important to just let you know that there's such a thing as connective gratitude versus verbal gratitude versus concrete gratitude. So connective gratitude is when you honor your benefactor based on what you know that person would appreciate. So if you know your principal would appreciate a thank you note, do that rather than a face-to-face. Or if you know that your mom would appreciate a picture or a gift from you, concrete gratitude in the form of a gift, do that. Or verbal gratitude. So there's verbal, concrete, and connective gratitude. The bottom line here is let's give students options to express their gratitude, whether it's a picture or a gift or a rap or a dance, ways that feel right for them. There's so many different ways that we can share appreciation, and gratitude has the potential to bring us together, to create belonging, and to foster trust. So here's the last practice I want to share with you. It's a really simple practice you can share with your students or your colleagues. And this one taps self-awareness a little bit more than any other gratitude practice, potentially also self-management. So our objective here is to practice turning lower level complaints into gratitude statements. So why? Because this practice helps us to remember that in many situations, we have the opportunity to reframe negative thoughts with more positive and optimistic ones. And so, for example, here's one of my classic complaints, which is I cannot stand being in traffic and I cannot stand a long commute back from work. So I can choose to flip that complaint into, you know what, I am grateful that I get this time to detox in my car from my day. I can listen to a podcast, I can listen to music, I can focus on my breath, and this is my time. So you might also consider, this was another classic one that I had as a language arts teacher, is grading essays, grading persuasive argumentative essays, for example, and seeing that stack of papers or that stack of documents in your Google Doc share folder and knowing how much time it was going to take. So I would constantly complain about grading as a language arts teacher. So one of the ways that I reframe that regularly, I am so grateful that I get to hear through these persuasive essays what's important to my students, and then also just engage in a dialogue on paper and give them thoughtful feedback. So I thought of it as a way to really communicate meaningfully with them rather than just a task. So definitely try this today, right now if you want to, or afterwards, and then share this idea with your colleagues. The full practice is on our website, Greater Good in Education, and I'm going to show you that right now. Apparently, this practice can help with well-being as you continuously reframe. It's sort of like a cognitive behavioral therapy practice, reframing something negative and a different light. It can help alleviate stress and depression, and even particularly with adults, but also potentially with kids. Here are some bonus practices I just wanted to tag on at the end of our time together. Take note of the ggie.berkeley.edu URL here at the top. We have over 200 practices for adults and for students to support social emotional well-being, and gratitude is just one category. So if you were to go onto the site and type in gratitude, you would find more than these 4 practices. The 3 good things on this list and the gratitude letter are the most well-researched and evidence-based in terms of countering countering stress and anxiety, feeling more positive after engaging in them. The 3 good things is typically participants in that intervention, that research intervention, spend about a week noting 3 good things. In a study of around 600 students who were 8 years old to 11 years old, the group who wrote about 3 good things for a week reported being happier afterwards, and get this, even 3 months later. So long-term benefits of gratitude and the ongoing practice of gratitude. If you take a look at the research in schools and colleges, you will see that gratitude can contribute to a greater sense of social support, school belonging, and satisfaction with the school experience. So just imagine what this can do for community building in our schools, for cultivating a sense of trust, affirming the good, seeing it around us, and paying it forward in a network of appreciation.